Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Whole Elephant Season 2, the first episode of Season 2. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. The Whole Elephant is my podcast based off of the poem The Blind Men and the Elephant, where 6 blind men are asked to describe an elephant, and they all describe him based on the first thing they feel. And so this is my opportunity. This is my journey of trying to see the whole elephant in life, talking to different people, getting different perspectives. And today, my guest, I'm very excited. My guest is David Hayward. David was a pastor for 30 years in Canada and quit to pursue his passion in art. I discovered his art on Instagram one day when one of my cousins posted one of his little cartoons that he does, and I loved it. Like immediately, I was drawn to it. It was funny and subversive about the church, and I absolutely loved it. But I was wondering what the heck my cousin had gotten herself into, because it was from an account called NakedPastor. I'm like, what in the world does NakedPastor mean? And so I went on, I followed him. I continued to love his art. I've bought a couple of pieces of his art. I absolutely love it. And after a while, I thought this would be a perfect person to have to kick off season 2. In the Christianity, we talk a lot about deconstruction, deconstructing those things, those beliefs that we grew up in that as you get a little older start to not make any more sense. And David is a bit of an expert in deconstruction and went through the journey himself and also has guided a lot of people through it. So if you are somebody that struggles with doubt, belief, and you feel like you're going through that deconstruction, first of all, this is the right podcast for you. You've come to the right place. This is a safe place to do that sort of thing. And I'm really excited for you to hear from David today. Enjoy the chat. Hello, David.
Hello, Eric.
How are you, man? Welcome to The Whole Elephant. This is an exciting day. I appreciate you coming on and doing this, man.
Thanks, and I'm glad to be here. Hi, everybody out there.
You're in Canada.
I am.
I did not know that you were Canadian until I started to research a little bit for this today. America's just fine right now. We're totally fine. We're not going through anything. What is it like? What is it like being a Canadian, kind of watching from the outside of what's going on in America right now?
Well, I've got mixed feelings because I love America. I love Americans. I'm married to an American, and our kids are dual, and one of our kids is in America right now. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of friends, and my biggest audience is in the United States. And so I have a huge interest in the USA, and I really care about it. So I'm very much in tune with what's going on down there, and trying to keep abreast of everything. But so much is happening so fast. It's kind of been that way for years now.
Yeah, but, it's gonna be interesting, the intro to this podcast, if I have to rework it, because by the time this airs, God knows what'll happen. And I don't want people to think that we skimmed over something really important just because we're doing it today and not later in a couple weeks.
I know it's crazy times. I mean, Lisa and I made the decision a couple of years ago to no longer get cable. Actually, it was it was mostly for my mental health, just, not following the news all the time. And so I reverted to Twitter for my updates on what's happening. And, it's busy. There's a lot happening, and, a lot of chaos and a lot of concern. And these next few days are critical, and I'm watching with keen interest right now.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump into NakedPastor and all the stuff you got going on. I feel like I probably discovered your stuff the way a lot of people have. One of my cousins, in their Instagram stories, posted something of your art, and I went, whoa, that's really cool. What is going on with this guy, NakedPastor? But before we get into the art, give me a little background of, I know you were working in ministry for a long time before this even came about. What is your background? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I was born in Canada, Toronto actually, and grew up, basically in Canada, in the church, in Christianity. Went up through the ranks, youth group, uh, Pentecostal church, Baptist church, Bible believing, Bible thumping, born again, the whole
Sure.
9 yards. Went to Bible college. That's where I met my wife, Lisa. And from there, I went to seminary, got my master's in New Testament studies from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. And from there, I hopped into the Presbyterian Church because that's the only place I could actually find a job, and got some education and ministry experience there. From there, I went to start my PhD, but we got pregnant. I had to stop that. And I went ahead and got ordained and served the Presbyterian Church in Canada for several years. Got bored there, left there, and started pastoring in the Vineyard Church. And after many years of serving the church there, in 2010, I finally left the ministry. And so that was 2010. I started the Naked Pastor blog in about 2005. And so I sort of took a leap of faith to see if I could make a go of Naked Pastor full time. And eventually it worked. So that's what I do now.
Yeah. What was the origins of Naked Pastor? What was the idea? What was the concept when you started to dream it up?
Well, I was trying to think of a name. My first website name was davidhayward.ca. That was boring. And then I thought of, then my next one was churchpundit.com, which I thought was kind of snooty. So I just finally realized what I really wanted to do was blog about the life of a pastor in very honest, transparent, vulnerable, raw ways. Yeah. So that's where Naked Pastor came in. And at the time, the Naked Chef and the Naked Archaeologist and Naked Truth, all these kinds of things were buzzwords. So I decided to go with Naked Pastor, which basically talks about me. I wanted people to see behind the scenes what was the life of a pastor was really like, without all the victory and triumphs and happy times. I wanted them to see the struggles and the fears and the hardships and the conflict and the financial struggles and lack of miracles and all this kind of stuff that, I wanted people to see behind the curtain. So that's what Naked Pastor was about.
That's very rare. I've been in ministry for 15 years now, 3 as a youth pastor and 12 as a worship pastor. Oh, yeah. People don't know what's going on.
No.
First of all, I think too many people put us on pedestals and think that we're somehow superhumans. We're not. We're people, and in a lot of ways, ministry is just a job. It functions very much like a job, and an office functions very much like an office. But I think that people think that we feel encouraged all the time. Like, I think that people think that when we're up there, we're feeling like good feedback. And I feel like I get so little feedback.
Yeah.
That's really, really, I think what we do and what people's perception of what we do is very different.
Yeah. Yeah. If your love language is words of affirmation, good luck. Because I found it kind of scarce as well. And it is, ministry isn't pretty. I have a huge heart for pastors. Of course, I was a pastor. I served the church in pastoral capacity for about 30 years. So I know all about it, even though I do critique the church and critique pastoral ministry and some pastoral styles and, things. I have a huge heart for pastors, and I know a lot of pastors are going through a difficult time. And so I totally get it. I was there.
Yeah. So you were writing this blog and ultimately left the church. What specifically were you writing about that caused friction that made people go, hey, I don't know if you should be doing this anymore?
Well, actually, it's interesting you made the connection between my blog and me leaving the ministry, because it kind of is related, although not 100%. So I was pastoring a Vineyard church at the time. And for those who don't know what Vineyard is, it's kind of a mix between evangelical Baptist theology and charismatic experience. So you kind of put a little bit of Baptist, a little bit of Pentecostal, a little bit of progressive in a pot and stir it up. That's what Vineyard kind of looks like, or looked like back then. I think it's gotten more conservative since I joined. But and I love the church. I enjoyed it. I had a great leadership team and a really good sense of community, and I really enjoyed it. And I felt like I always found myself gravitating towards churches that I felt I had room to grow. And I thought I had infinite room to grow in this church, but I eventually got to a place in my blog, I suppose people were starting to see what I was thinking. Of course, I wanted to be honest. That's the whole point of Naked Pastor.
Sure.
But, people in my congregation really didn't read my blog. They were like, well, we have to listen to you every week. Why would we want to read your blog? And they were serious. And I'm like, yeah, fine, cool, But the problem was other churches, local churches and other vineyards were catching wind of what I was saying and passing it on to the higher ups and to people in my congregation. So, the words started rolling. And in 2009, I started getting letters of concern, quote unquote, and calls from head office and, invitations to have my blog edited first before I posted. And I knew my time was up. My days were numbered. And sure enough, within a year, I was gone.
What were those contentious issues? What did people have a problem with? Do you
well, I strayed beyond your pretty orthodox evangelical views. And so like many people who, I don't know if you use the word deconstruction on your podcast much.
Oh, it's written down. We're going to talk a lot about it today.
Yeah. So when people start questioning their beliefs or trying to grow beyond what's been inherited or what we've been conditioned to believe or what we've been taught to believe, and we want to start exploring beyond those boundaries, there's often very little room in the church for that to occur. The church often considers it threatening or backsliding or straying or whatever. I think the church is great in carrying people up to a certain point in their spiritual growth journey. But when it gets to the point where kind of like adolescence, where you start bucking authority and questioning everything and saying things like, I don't have to believe that just because you tell me to. The church has a hard time with that stage. And that's usually the stage where a lot of people end up leaving the church because that's the only way they can find the freedom to think for themselves and to grow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much, this podcast is very much because I'm in a deconstructive phase. I would say maybe that I've had the realization that I always want to be in a deconstructive phase. Mm-hmm. That I very much became very wary of any absolutes.
Right.
And I really, the second I deconstruct it, I don't want to build it up into another absolute. Does that make sense?
Totally. I'm 100% in agreement, and I write about this a lot. A lot of people criticize, I talk about deconstruction a lot. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say, yes, but what about reconstruction? I'm like, no, don't, because you're just going to end up in the same situation again, where you have to question the structures and the systems and the ideologies that you've adopted. I'm an open concept kind of a guy. In fact, when we bought this house, I kicked down every wall I could to create space. And deconstruction is kind of like that, where you remove ideologies or ideas or theologies or whatever that are preventing you from growing and experiencing more wonder and more mystery and grandeur. And so when you get a lot of people, when they get to that open space, they feel a little bit nervous, a little bit scared, because we've been taught to be absolutely certain about what we believe and to always have, always be prepared to explain yourself.
And that God spits out lukewarm Christians. And if you don't, for me, my faith really came alive in junior high because I had a really, really good junior high youth pastor. But So I'm 12. He's like 25. So, the idea now seems ridiculous that God would ordain in 1995 this 25-year-old to teach me everything perfectly that I had to believe for the rest of my life. Right. Obviously, now that seems ridiculous, but I carried that for a long time. Yes. That if I don't believe this, it's starting to not make too much sense. But still, if I don't believe this, then I'm out of the club.
Right.
And, and that's just tribalism at its finest. But
yes,
that's been a process for me the last couple of years of going, it's okay to question this. There's so many examples in the Bible of people questioning, of people searching, and that's an okay place to be.
Yeah. So, I totally agree that it's good to get to a place where the mind can actually hold at the same time two seemingly contradictory or conflicting thoughts. So the mind's ability to embrace paradox and mystery is, I think, a sign of wisdom. And rather than being able to spout off doctrines or memory verses or whatever, the ability to live in mystery, and like many of the mystics talk about, be able to abide in the cloud of unknowing, for example, is, I think, a sign of spiritual growth and wisdom.
I mean, Christians are terrible at living in the mystery. And so to me, so much bad theology that I've seen is we get to the point of mystery, and instead of just sitting in it, instead of experiencing it, we make up fiction. And that's how we get things like, oh, your aunt passed away. God must have needed another angel in heaven. What? Yeah. Like, the mystery of death, you're sitting in that space, and then you just make up a narrative that then gets trickled down to generations and becomes dogma. And then all of a sudden you have people who are looking at it going, well, that's ridiculous, because it really is.
But I claim it's not a Christian problem. It's actually a human one. So sure. Anybody in any religion or non-religion or whatever, have difficulty dealing with paradox and, mystery. So but Christians aren't exempt from that human problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Let me ask you this, though, when it comes to deconstruction, there are tons of people who, whatever they believed, we always say at my church, it's like the person who got a haircut in the 80s and just decided they were going to keep that haircut for the rest of their lives. This is no matter what happens, I'm sticking with this hairstyle. That kind of naivete of faith, what they learned when they were a kid, it just works for them the rest of their life. They don't feel the need to deconstruct. They're scared of it or whatever. Is that a bad thing?
No, one of the things I strongly believe in is freedom of choice. I believe in the freedom of the individual and whatever you choose. So there's, for example, James Fowler's famous book, classic book on the stages of faith. Excuse me. He talks about 6 stages of faith, and talks about how many of us might get to stage 3, but when we get to stage 4, which is the questioning phase, where we start to question all of the beliefs that we were taught and inherited and are conditioned to believe. That's a very, very uncomfortable time. And I've seen it myself in my own life and the lives of some of my friends and the lives of so many people online that I've met, that it's so scary that some people actually revert back to an earlier stage where it's secure and certain, and there's no questions you have to deal with, there's no mystery you have to cope with. And it just feels a lot more comfortable. Of course, you are sort of accepting a willing ignorance. You're needing to sort of like cover your ears and la 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 la, pretend nothing's happening, and just stick to your guns, right? But I know some people who actually consciously and intentionally choose that. They say, I can't go there. It's too scary for me. I need, Jesus as my friend, kind of thing, to keep me feeling secure and safe.
Yeah. I guess I kind of struggle with, people in my life that live in that space. Well, first of all, I kind of envy it because, like you said, whether it's a false safety, it's still the feeling of safety.
Mm-hmm.
And if that works for them, that's great. But it also is then passed down to generations. It's passed, and so I struggle with,
Right.
okay, yeah, believe what you want to believe, live how you want to live, but also it's affecting others. It's affecting Christianity as a whole. I kind of struggle in that space of where people should be in that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so you do have that tension between freedom and responsibility. I know some people who they want to stay at that secure stage, and they're okay if you don't. You want to move on, and they're fine with that. But when you become sort of fundamentalistic, and you say, you prescribe this same set of beliefs for everybody else, and that they must believe the way you believe, that's where everything breaks down. Then we're not really free. Yeah. So, many of the people I know who, have tasted the danger of growing in their questions and so on, but have reverted back. They're okay with other people who go there. They just don't want to go there themselves.
Right. Okay.
Let
me ask you this. You've walked the deconstructive journey with a lot of people now at this point. Are there common themes? Are there common stories that you hear of things that people need to deconstruct? Commonalities between the stories?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of commonalities. Of course, I encourage everybody to do their own deconstruction. There's no prescribed method. You're basically like a pioneer, finding your own spiritual ground, and nobody's taken this path before, and you're basically on your own. I know, and that's not very comforting to say, but it really is true. You're basically on your own, because if you want to be spiritually independent and be your own spiritual self, it's going to require that scary sense of, you're going to be hearing in the back of your mind, who are you accountable to? Who's your pastor or mentor, or who's guiding you? Who's your spiritual director? Who's your covering or umbrella, or, all this, all these kind of questions will come to your mind. Right. Plus, another common factor is if I'm wrong, I'm going to hell. And that's a huge fear that a lot of people have. What if there really is a hell that I'm going to? I don't even believe in it, but what if I'm going there because I don't believe in it, kind of thing?
Yeah.
And that's another commonality. Yeah. And so what I try to do is just walk alongside people and encourage them. One of the things people realize when they hang out with me in my community is that they're not alone and they're not crazy, and that this is normal for people who are growing. And so that brings a lot of comfort and encouragement to them, and courage to press on and to continue on this path to spiritual independence. Yeah.
I mean, I lead worship every Sunday, and when I started this journey, I still wanted to be able to stand up and lead people in worship, and I was definitely afraid that people would look at my doubts and look at my questioning as, disqualifying me from being able to do that. Beautifully, I've seen the exact opposite. I've seen people come out of the woodworks, and I've had conversations that I would never have had if I just stood up there and sang. So it's been a beautiful thing. When you look at the church as a whole, I mostly look at the church in America because that's where I'm at. But when you look at the church as a whole, what are we getting right? What are we getting wrong?
Well, a lot of people assume, because
that's a big question, so you can take it any direction you want to.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people assume too quickly when they come to my blog or see my cartoons is that I'm an enemy of the church, and I'm absolutely not. I love the church. I value it. The church is like my spiritual mother. I grew up in it. I wouldn't be who I am today unless I gone through the church, meaning I'm happy with where I'm at today.
Mm.
And I'm thankful for the church for bringing me to this place.
Sure.
Or didn't bring me all the way, but it helped me get to where I am. You understand?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of appreciation for the church. And so I kind of repeat what I said before. I wish the church would be more open to questions that would give more space for people to seriously ask questions and to have doubts and to struggle with these mysteries, and for the church to teach more open-handedly and not with so much certainty. And I think a lot more people would stay, a lot less people would leave, and some would come back. Of course, what we're seeing now with COVID is a strange thing where a lot of people are feeling they don't need to go to church and oftentimes shouldn't. And like here in Canada, we have pretty strict restrictions and rules during COVID. But there's a lot of people are realizing some things, and I think the church needs to hurry up and learn that people don't need the church. They don't. Like, people have discovered that. I've talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of people who are really realizing they don't need the church. And, that's a healthy thing, I think. Now, if people would want the church and there was a really healthy interdependence between church and its members, I think that would be really cool. And I think the way that can be achieved is by giving space for people to be who they are in their spiritual journeys, wherever that is.
Yeah. What do you think is stopping churches from doing that?
Well, because I was a pastor, I know exactly why. It's chaotic. It's chaotic when you have people who don't know and don't understand and are struggling with big questions like, why isn't God healing me? Why did God let my husband die? Why did I get COVID? Why am I always poor? Is there a God? I don't believe in the divinity of Jesus. All that. What if people start asking these questions? If they were given space,
right,
and even years of space, I contend, I think it would make a huge difference. But that kind of chaos is really scary and threatening for pastors and for churches. And so that's often one of the things any institution appreciates more than anything, including the church, and that's security and order. And if you can't guarantee what people know and behave in order and believe in order, then it just creates a chaos that nobody really wants.
Yeah. If you were to restart a church right now, functionally, what would that look like to you? How would you create that space functionally?
Well, the interesting thing is, back in 2012, I launched an online community called The Lasting Supper. And I created that mostly for myself, to start forming a community online of people who were deconstructing. And I thought I would sort of provide advice and be kind of like a guide to people who are deconstructing and so on. And I quickly learned the last thing many people who are deconstructing want is just another pastor or a spiritual leader or a guru. So I decided early on, I'm not their guru. Basically, we're a group of people who decided we want to be spiritually independent. We're deconstructing, but we want to hang out with other people. And so it's doesn't look anything like church, but in an interesting way, I feel like I'm fulfilling what I feel is my call as a pastor more than I ever have, online. So, I kind of joke that I'm virtually a pastor, but it's because I am, doing many of the things that a pastor would do.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's kind of like what I'm, I have nothing against people meeting locally at a building. I have no problem with buildings or money or, liturgy or style of worship. All that's incidental to me. To me, is the quality of community, the authenticity of community, the availability of space for people to grow in their own way, a space where people can feel free and responsible at the same time. And that, for me, if churches can achieve that, and in my opinion, it's kind of rare.
Yeah.
If they can achieve that, they'll be on their way to a really functional and healthy and authentic community.
Yeah. When somebody is in this process of deconstructing, I think people probably start deconstructing way before they realize that they're deconstructing. But when they feel at that spot, if you're their guide, if you're helping them on this journey type of thing, what's the first step? What's the first thing that they should look for, that they should do?
Well, when people do reach out to me and say, I think I'm starting to deconstruct, what do? I just say, buckle up, here's your helmet, enjoy the ride. Because it's scary. You're in for the ride of your life, but enjoy it. Like, I try to remove threats. So if you believe in God, if you still believe in God, you've probably gotten to the point where you believe God is gracious and that God is very patient and God allows you to question and so on. So if you are at a place now where you're deconstructing, you just need to believe that this God isn't going to throw you into hell forever for having questions and doubts and wanting to work through this mess with integrity. Yeah. So relax. Nobody's got a gun to your head. You're not going to hell. You're not going to be punished. You're not going down a notch in God's eyes. And to actually enjoy the ride. It's like, this is actually growth. It's not a deviancy or backsliding or you being deceived by the devil, although I know that's a real fear. Because the thing about deception is you never know you're being deceived, right? So just relax, trust yourself, and appreciate this journey you're on. Because as almost all growth is, it's going to hurt some, but it's growth, and just trust the process.
In all this time, you had to have experienced some people deconstructing to the thought that there is no God. What is your take on that? How does that resonate with you?
Well, that's a huge topic, and it's a really, really important one, because one of the things that provoked the sort of termination of me being a local pastor was in 2009. I had a very powerful spiritual kind of epiphany where I saw that basically we're all one and united. All of us, the whole world, the universe is all one. And that there's one reality, but that each one of us has our own paradigm that we understand what we're looking at through.
Sure.
And then we have our own language that we try to use to describe what we perceive. So this whole thing of apprehending reality and articulating reality, they're all different spins on the one reality. That for me was a huge, huge turning point in my life. I actually, immediately this sense of peace of mind came to me, and it's never left. It's the real deal. Where I my theological struggles and my angst and my deconstruct, everything evaporated.
Did that also change your eschatology at that point?
Oh yeah, everything changed. Yeah. Everything changed. Absolutely.
It would have to.
And this complete peace came over me, and I knew we're just speaking different languages trying to describe the one reality. So you might have an ardent believer and you might have an ardent atheist. To me, it's all language and words and thoughts. The only thing that seems to separate us is an idea and the words that we're using to try to explain that idea. Yeah. So I know I'm going way down a rabbit trail, but that
No,
to
I
me
love
is
it. I
really,
love it.
really
I think about
important.
this stuff. I think about this all the time.
Yeah. So an atheist might be very, very certain there is, this or that or the other, and a believer might believe there's this or that or the other. But listen, there's one reality. There's one reality, and we're just doing our best to try to explain and describe it. So a Christian or a Buddhist or a Muslim or an atheist or a Hindu or a Jew or whatever, they've either adopted or chosen this belief system in the language to explain their reality,
Right.
and or both, adopted and chosen, and I think it's important to realize that our conditioning is a huge part to do with our beliefs and our language. And so,
yeah. So if
that to
somebody
me
is
is very,
deconstructing, if someone's deconstructing the Christian God all the way to the point where they say there is no Christian God, you just look at that as they've deconstructed that paradigm view, and they're taking on a different paradigm view.
they've adopted a paradigm view. So when somebody asks me, do you believe in God? I have a really hard time answering that question, because we're still using the language of a binary belief system of either there is a God or there isn't a God.
Yes.
Right. So I have a really hard time explaining that language no longer works for me. That I feel like there's a beyond the either or, yes or no, black and white, of belief, and that we're just choosing words. I want to know what's beyond there is a God, there isn't a God. To me, they're both sides of the same coin, belief.
Yes. Yeah.
And what is beyond that?
Yeah. I'll tell you, when I first started to be awakened to that, to see that, when I got out of college, I got deeply into musical theater, which was weird for me, because I was a sports guy my whole life. Like, I played football all the way through college, and then found a deep love for music and musical theater after I already had my PE degree and was going to be a football coach my whole life. But I would go to these Broadway shows and be deeply, for lack of a better term, spiritually moved by them, and deeply moved by the truths in them. And as I got into the writers and kind of became a fan of these people, I'm like, okay, Tim Minchin is a great example. He was on my podcast last season.
Oh, cool.
Profoundly atheist.
Yes.
And I'm watching his shows in tears, because I'm experiencing these profound truths that I believe also, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because I had been raised to only see, my podcast name, One Part of the Elephant, I thought that I was experiencing joy and truth through God, and nobody outside of Christendom was.
Right.
And when I saw that wasn't true, when I saw the exact same truths, the exact same love, joy, beauty, other places, it forces you to go, but then what is that? It has to be a same unifying thing.
I've had the same experience just not too long ago, where I was reading one of Carlo Rovelli. He's a quantum physicist. I was reading one of his books on quantum physics, and he claims to be an atheist. He's 100% scientist, quantum physicist. Yeah. And Lisa looks over and she says, "Are you crying?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just find this so moving." But it's funny. I just read a Meister Eckhart quote. He's a Christian mystic from the 12 or 1300s, and he said that. And I've said this before. I didn't realize he said it, or maybe I'd forgotten. But there's all this theological argument that can happen, doctrinal argument and everything, statements and arguing over this or that or the other thing. But when you get to the level of the mystics, or I don't mean level, when you dabble in with the mystics or quantum physicists or philosophers and so on, they start sounding the same. There's a similar language there. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm interested in. What is beyond all this doctrine and dogma and theology and everything, what is it pointing to? Because that's all it is. It's all of that's just a sign pointing to something. What is beyond? Where the mystics and the philosophers and the quantum physicists and scientists and everybody are kind of exploring and trying to articulate.
Even though I then take this paradigm and then worship God through, modern music and all that stuff, that kind of God is so much more worthy of praise to me than sticking him in a Christian box, in a Christian bubble.
Right.
That's a God that blows my mind. And that excites me about God way more than just learning about only Christianity and kind of sticking him in the box of what I can perceive by reading the Bible only.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what deconstruction is all about, is it's like taking down deconstructing a home. You're removing boxes and barriers and limitations, So yeah, I think that's huge.
Yeah. Let's talk about your art for a little bit. Was art always a part of your life, or is that something that came out recently because of this blog and stuff?
No, I grew up watching my dad paint and stuff. So, and I just drawn to it. Oops, little pun there. But I don't ever remember not drawing and painting. So, I've been, doing paintings for as long as I can remember, usually watercolors. But I mostly did these nice kind of serene watercolor landscapes. And then in 2005 or six, I was inspired to just see if I could draw a cartoon. And I thought, I've seen other cartoonists and I like a good cartoon. And I really like a good cartoon, like in one frame, like the New Yorker magazine or something like that.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd give it a shot. And I said to myself, I'm going to challenge myself to do a cartoon every day. And until I ran out of ideas, I thought I'd last a month. But here it is, 16 years later, and I'm still drawing cartoons. And, I just kept at it, doing it every day. I still do my paintings and I sell those. And I do other things like images of Christ and Sophia and stuff. But what I'm best known for, obviously, is my cartoons. And it's just, I kept doing it every day, and it's just grown and grown and grown. So,
yeah, somebody asked me about what your art is like the other day, and I mentioned the New Yorker. So I'm glad that was accurate and
cool.
Apparently a compliment. So
yeah, good. It is. It is a compliment.
A lot of your art is around the LGBT community. Why has that been a passion of yours? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for several reasons. One is I was complicit in a system that has not always been kind towards the LGBTQ plus community. I never personally preached against, LGBTQ because I was never certain what was what. I couldn't decide. And then when I finally realized what was going on, that was another component in me leaving the ministry, was the church where I was, and the Vineyard generally, is not affirming. And so I didn't feel I could stay any longer. And so I left the ministry. And plus I have a lot of friends who are gay or bisexual or transgender or lesbian or, asexual or, gender fluid, all kinds of different friends. Yeah. And I am an advocate for them. And I affirm them, and I'm an ally, and I'm doing my best to either reform institutions that are not being fair to them, or to see them die, really, if they can't reform themselves to be inclusive and affirming. And so that's why I'm every week at least there's one or two cartoons related to that issue. I think it's huge. I think it almost feels like this is a hill the church is willing to die on. So for example, even the Vineyard Church in Canada, just this year in January, Wait now. What year are we in? Holy smokes! Last year,
Last year.
recently anyway. The Vineyard Church in Canada decided not to be affirming and not to allow for same-sex marriage and so on. And that's the hill they seem willing to die on, because I think it is they've rung their own death knell, I think.
Yeah.
I want to see that change. So that's why I'm passionate about it and talk so much about it.
There's a lot of things, and I'm not even talking about like Old Testament weird rules that we just don't even concern ourselves with. But there's even a lot of New Testament things, like divorce and what that means to the church now, and how we've kind of been able to move past some of those things.
Right.
What is it about that community that the church has been slow to respond to, slow to react, slow to change?
It's identity. It's not behavior, right? I think that's the big deal. So, I was in the Pentecostal church in Canada when you could not, I don't even know if you could be a member of the church if you were divorced. You certainly couldn't be a pastor if you were a divorced person. Yeah. Now that's all history, but that's behavior. That's not identity. I don't equate, but to me, it reminds me of, whites only church where you're not welcome if you're Black, person of color. You're not welcome here, and you can't play if you're LGBTQ plus. And so it's not about behavior. And I know a lot of evangelicals, et cetera, would like it to make it about that, but it's about identity. My friend is a lesbian. My friend is gay. My friend is transgender. This is not behavior. It's identity. And I think the church needs to hurry up and catch up with that reality.
Yeah, I mean, in the church's not so distant past, like you said, the white supremacist nature of a whites-only church, we look at that now and go, how could they have thought that?
Right.
I mean, that's ridiculous. And literally, I stay up. It haunts me at night thinking about, what do I believe now that in 100 years people are going to look back at me and go, what was he thinking? That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I certainly think our treatment of that community is going to be part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I do hope that. I mean, what we're seeing in the States right now and around the world, white supremacy is rearing its ugly head and trying to gain supremacy again, and make itself the standard of truth. But I hope for most people, they realize that it's a lie.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping the same will come true for my gay, transgender, et cetera, friends who want a place in the church. But one of the things I get upset with is when people say, "Why do you want to be a part of an institution that doesn't want you?" That's not fair. That's like saying, "Why do you want to be a part of your family, even though your mom and dad don't, accept you as you are?" I mean, because we want to belong to something that we should be able to belong to.
Right.
Basically, you're talking segregation if you're inviting gay people to go down the road and start their own church. That makes it easier for the straight people.
And I mean, Jesus' example was, he was absolutely radical in who he chose to hang out with, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, he hung out with people that literally made the religious people angry. And when you read scripture and you see who the writers chose to include, there was a crowd of people, and this lady and this lady were there too. And you do the research, and one was a prostitute, and one was the wife of a Roman diplomat. And he was radical in who he chose to hang out with. And he was radical in his teaching of, the Good Samaritan. We've taken it as, be kind to others, but that was, the hero of the story was the other. The hero of the story was the enemy. And when I read the Good Samaritan, I read that I am the hurting man who needs to allow myself to be healed. I'm missing healing. I'm missing part of God's healing if I'm creating an other, if I'm not allowing that community into my life. And I just look at Jesus' example and go, how could we exclude anybody?
Mm-hmm.
He literally got in trouble with the religious people of that time for not doing that.
Right.
Why would I get to pick and choose who can come to church?
Right. Yeah. And you know, I always want to clarify that, you know, a lot of people say, hey, if Jesus can hang out with a sex worker, he can hang out with gay people too. I always want to be careful, you know, when we're not equating being gay with what were considered or some consider sins. You know,
oh no,
like
I just bring that up to show diversity, the diversity of people that he hung out with. There was no other,
including different religions and different races.
Yeah, not to equate those, just the diversity of who he hung out with. There was no such thing as the other, except for the religious people, kind of.
Yeah. So one of my recent cartoons that stirred up a little bit of stuff recently was where a guy was on the phone. He says, "Yes, we welcome gay people here. We welcome all kinds of sinners here." And you know, that's kind of the attitude some people have, but that's not enough. That's just not enough, because again, it's about identity. This is who these people are deep down to the core of their being. It's their identity, and I think that's where we need to hurry up.
Yeah, my uncle is gay, and I was talking to him one time, and he said one of the most condescending, hurtful things that I've ever heard a Christian say is hate the sin, love the sinner.
Yeah.
Because it's who I am. It's my identity. And that is insanely condescending, even though you kind of mean it to be nice.
Yeah. A lot of people say that, and it is offensive. And a lot of people don't even think about what they're saying. It's just a convenient little quote that they've heard and don't realize how hateful it actually, and hurtful it is.
Yeah. Well, let's end on a positive. What is your hope for the church moving forward? You know, it's hard when I say that, because, you know, I think the church, it's not like Starbucks, right? So I can go visit you in Canada, and we can go to Starbucks and get the exact same burnt beans that I can get down the road here in Montrose, California. But the church is so diverse and so different that it's hard to, you know, pigeonhole it into one thing. But in general, what is your hope for the church moving forward?
Well, there are strong voices and voices in the church that I think are really important and need to be heard, and you know, that as they gain in volume and quantity, I think that's really important for the future of the church. I'm talking about diversity, so I'm talking about you know, feminists, women of color, people of color, theologians, LGBTQ plus and queer theologians, and pastors. You know, these kind of voices that are on the rise and on the increase, and could be critiquing the church because they care or they believe in it and want it to reform. I think that's my hope, is that these voices are gaining traction. And, you know, that's my hope, is that the church will listen to its prophets and rather than stone them. And hopefully that will, you know, provide the space the church needs to reform itself. It's like the, you know, I was in the Presbyterian Church, which is a Reformed theology kind of denomination. And that's one of the mottos, I think, of the Presbyterian Church, or Reformed Church, is reformed and always reforming. And you know, it's one thing to be reformed. It's one thing to have changed in the past, but we have to continue to change and continue to reform. And so we need to listen to the prophets that are out there, and or else judgment in some kind of form will come. And you know, I think that's my hope for the future.
Awesome. Well, dude, I so appreciate you taking the time to do this. Every time a new piece of art pops up on Instagram, I get really excited because I love all of them. How can people follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I'm NakedPastor anywhere and everywhere. One word, NakedPastor. If you type in naked and pastor with 2 words, you're going to see things you can't unsee. So just Naked Pastor, 1 word. And I'm just at Naked Pastor, nakedpastor.com. And then I'm on all the social media, including I just started on TikTok. So there you go.
There you go. All right, David, thank you so much for doing this, man. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, we did it.
Cool.
A few interruptions, but not too bad. Dude, it was so nice to meet you. Yeah, so nice to meet you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Anytime. Have me back.
All right, brother.
Okay.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Yeah.